Hello and welcome to today's video. I see that there's a problem already with it in as much as this is not actually doing it in the orientation that I requested of it. And so it's in this orientation. This does have a slight problem in as much as I wanted to keep this open the other way around so I can actually see my computer screen at the same time. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to hold this now in my hand. Now, this is a live broadcast, so if you want to ask any questions, please do so. As always with live broadcasts, I'm going to have to warn that I don't, please keep the language suitable, and that I suppose that's it really. So I was last Friday, I was a bit shocked to see huge amounts of stuff on my inbox related to the Jack the Ripper case having been solved. And this isn't the first time that this has been solved. It seems to be that every 5 years the same person gets a hold of his PR agency and he puts out probably a new copy of the same book. And the problem here with this is obviously that he hasn't solved it, but I've got to congratulate his PR agency, because the PR agency is doing an excellent job in keeping this in the news. I'm not so much blaming the person who wrote the book, but what I do blame is all these news outlets which said that this had been solved. And now, whereas you do expect the likes of the Sun or the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom, they make things up anyway, so you don't expect any journalism from them. But there were news outlets which really I would have expected better, and I would have expected them to check their facts. It occurred to me that I could actually go through an interview that was done on News Nation in the United States, and then actually to do a reaction video to it. It was one thing I watched and I thought was totally nonsensical, and I might even yet do that, but I've never done it before, and I'm also a bit concerned of what the copyright may be on something of that nature. What I want to do today is I'll explain a bit of my own knowledge of this, and then to actually set the scene for and to try and explain. I can explain who was responsible for the story, but I can't explain who was responsible for the killings, of course. In my case, my own interest, because the author of this book, he said he saw the Johnny Depp film 2001, I think it was, From Hell. I started watching it, but I saw which way it was going. I just gave it up completely. I thought it was complete and absolute nonsense, and I didn't want to sort of cluttering my brain up with stupidity. But my own interest came in on the 100th anniversary, so in 1888, or in 1988, I should say. There was a film with Michael Caine and Lewis Collins, was it? He was the one who was in The Professionals. And whereas historically it's a load of nonsense, but it's got some fantastic music, and it's sort of it got me sort of into it. So I started taking a bit of an interest, and within the time I've actually taken people out in the early 90s. I actually took people around the East End, showing them some of the sites. The thing is, it's now really completely changed to what it was. Indeed, when I did the video from Mitre Square last week, I got into Mitre Square where the fourth killing took place, and I thought, no, this is no, I've gone the wrong way somewhere. There was a huge office block. Now, I knew about this development was going to come along, so I take a vague interest in watching in real estate and things of this nature. But I didn't expect it to have been built that quickly. So anyway, so it really has changed enormously. Now, in the early 80s, it was still possible to see lots. That was still, I think, to a certain amount of the flavor, if I can use that word, of the surroundings was still there. Whereas by today, it's largely all gone. Having said that, I walked down one of the streets, Golden Street, and that was a street where the murderer left part of the clothing of Catherine Eddowes, and he dumped it in a doorway there. And there still are period buildings there from this time. Now, to set the situation, because I think this is really important, it's to understand the what was going on there at the time. Now, if you know London or you don't know London, you know the Tower of London is. And if you just have to cross the road from the Tower of London, and now you're in the East End and you're in a totally different environment, even today, you're in a totally different setting. And what happened was that this was sort of one of these places called extramural, beyond the walls of the city, which grew up I would say, in the case of this site, in the 17th century onwards. And initially, in the area of Whitechapel, Spitalfields, you had rather wealthy silk weavers living in this area, particularly the people who came from France, Huguenot, and who sort of developed the silk weaving business. And they had these houses which were quite nice, but as their business and the technology they used was no longer suitable, this area sort of fell down into became poorer and poorer. Now, two incidents happened which caused an influx of poor refugees into the United Kingdom, into London. The first one was the famine in Ireland, which happened in the 1840s, and in my own case, part of my own family came across because it was Ireland, part of the United Kingdom then, and the second thing was the assassination of the Tsar, the pogroms in Russia, and people fleeing these pogroms, and people came by ship, and they ended up in the East End. Now, if you look at a map, you can see that the docks it's now called Docklands, but I don't think much docks there any longer, except for sort of pleasure craft. But the docks are very close to the centre of London. And so it was people arrived at the docks and then they sort of looked for somewhere to live nearby. And that's quite common with all sort of the way immigrants usually arrive in some place. And then because there's other people from their homeland or whatever it is, and so they actually go there. Now, as far as Whitechapel was concerned, also, this is an area where businesses which supplied other areas of London started up. So you had things like people working in the meat business, you've got the slaughterhouses, you've got things such as making tar or rope things related to the shipbuilding industry, or the shipping industry, I should say, not shipbuilding, shipping industry. The ships weren't built there, and so you've got these businesses in this area which are set up, and so it's very mixed. There's partially people are living there, but also people are working there. But this work though didn't produce wealth for the area. Now, at the time of these killings in 1888, there were around 80,000 people living in the area, and these people were, to a large extent, they were poor. I think they were treated somewhat as you often see in films from the United States, where you get people from a sort of a middle class background suddenly find themselves in a ghetto somewhere or a poor area, and then they have to sort of try and escape out of it. And I think to a large extent that was the sort of thing that then existed, that the people from outside looked down on these people who lived in Whitechapel, particularly when they started looking totally different as the Jewish people from what is today Poland or other areas of what was then Russia looked. So because of this underclass of people. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody was poor, but certainly it wasn't the case, and we can certainly see that from records. Many people were in business and they were doing relatively well for themselves. And indeed, one of the witnesses to the killing of Catherine Eddowes was somebody who started off as an immigrant to this country, and then he managed to work his way up, and so much so that you can see in the photographs of his daughter's wedding in 1898, he looking very, very now upper middle class sort of thing. So through hard work, he managed to actually do that. And many of the people were even brought in for questioning during the Jack the Ripper or the Whitechapel murders were clearly also people who had some sort of business. But there was this extremely significant underclass who lived there. And to give an idea of that, of those 80,000 people living there, well over 10%, some 8,500, were believed just to be the people living in common lodging houses. And so therefore, these common lodging houses would be like a sort of a hostel where you could rent a bed, which was like a coffin. In fact, I think they were even called coffin or coffin bed, and you could rent that for 4p a night. Now, to put this in modern money, so 4p is like 2p today, and so the difference you've got times for that between 80 and 100. So let's even say times 100. So that's like £2 in today's money. But that wasn't even the cheapest accommodation. There was another form of accommodation. If you get the chance to read Down and Out in Paris and London, George Orwell gives a rather amusing account of this, but it can't have been nice at all. There's something called a lean-to or a hangover, and that is where it was like a wooden bench. I think it normally would have a back to it, but like you get in station waiting rooms and things like that, and there was a rope put in front of it, and so what you'd do is you'd lean on the rope and you try to get a night's sleep like that. And I suppose it was better than sort of lying out in the open somewhere, and that would cost 2p, 2d, 2 dunce, as used to be said where I come from. That is 1p today, or less than 1p today. So that's £1 in today's money. And so really, if people can't afford the pound, then they really must be down and out. Now, in these common lodging houses, depending on their nature, but there weren't places where you could actually keep your stuff. So people took their stuff and they carried it on them all the time. So when we have the accounts of the victims of the Whitechapel murder, you've got also the accounts of all the possessions that they actually had on them. And I think that also it's a real condemnation of the system that existed then. So if we look now, I'm always going about going to original sources in whatever I actually talk about. And I noticed that lots of people are quoting from films and things like that when they talk about Jack the Ripper. Now, as far as original sources are concerned for these killings, there are two places. Above all, most documents are in two places, and they are easily accessible and anyone can go to them. They're the archives. The biggest one is the Public Records Office, which is in Kew, which has now got since for the last 7 years. It's got the police files are there, and anyone can go there. The other one is in the National Health Service archive. So they had things there from the London Hospital, which St Bartholomew's Hospital, so St Bartholomew's Archive. You've got there's material there. These are the number 2 sources for original documentation. Unfortunately, the City Police Archive, which would have had information about Catherine Eddowes, who's the one now with this DNA allegedly, and that was destroyed by the Luftwaffe in 1940. So those records, the city police records, have been lost. But the others are available and anyone can see them. And what I note is that people do not go back to original sources, and I see this constantly happening, and which is a bit of a problem. Now, if you did go to them, you will find that there's a large amount of information from the Metropolitan Police, and that their estimates, their research, or if that's the right word, into brothels, and they estimate that there were about around 1,200 women working as prostitutes in the autumn of 1888. So this would mean if let's say there's a transient population of 40,000 females in this area, so there clearly is a very few. Sorry, there's a lot of people there chasing not many potential clients, and for many of these women, the cost of this service would be the same as the cost of either a drink or the night's lodging. Indeed, there was one of the victims. She said the following: "Look, I've 3 times had my kip, my sleep for the night, and I've 3 times spent it on drink. So I'm going out to find another client to get the money to stay here for the night." And then she was murdered shortly afterwards. Now, with all of this in mind, I think what really is important, it's the poverty that existed at the time. And you had, if you were born in the East End in 1888, you had a 45% chance of reaching the age of 5. That was it, 45%. The death rate was horrendous. Of course, I mean, people were having many more children than we do today. Now, this next problem is, so we've got that. Next thing is the social tensions, because you've got these groups all coming to one. Let's say you had New York, for example, in the at the same time, you'd have sort of groups from various countries. Maybe there weren't so many different groups as there were in New York, in London, but there were quite a lot. And another thing which happened is social tensions. And only the previous year, 1887, there'd been a major demonstration in Trafalgar Square. Now, very, very Trafalgar Square, to get to Parliament from Trafalgar Square, it's a 10-minute walk. So this was really a part of the overall atmosphere that existed in the East End. Now, there's another thing I think that which is really important, is this. So people from the outside looked on the East End as a sort of a zoo. That's my word. Sorry, or they looked at them as sort of underclass. So the scandal sheets of the time wanted to highlight what was going on there when these killings occurred. Now, there's nothing unusual about killings. Will happen there all the time, and most of them are pretty brutal. Prostitute killing was it was very common. Again, original sources, look at the document it from other people who were the victims of this. What made this stand out was the fact, in my opinion, it was probably the fact that it was believed to be a doctor or something like that. I think it was that the press got onto after the second killing, the one in Hanbury Street. I think it was then the press got onto it. Then the press invented some of the letters. Now, it's often said there were only 3 letters written to the police. I've seen this repeated so many times. There were hundreds. There's still quite a lot in the Public Records Office. I think it was the newspaper, the journalists, who invented those 3 letters above all, and they did this in order to sell newspapers. That was the whole aim. So this is the first. This is where the importance of the Jack the Ripper killings, the Whitechapel murder. This first one to where the newspapers, and it's the first one that I know of, and I might be wrong on this, but I think it's the first case where there was a criminal profiling. Thomas Bond, he wrote what he considers to be a profile of the killer himself. So before I actually come on to, in fact, I'm not even going to come on to the murders. I think I'll leave that for another time. But I will actually come on to hear these 2 questions in. So the first thing about the murderer is this, is that the murderer had to be a local person. Of that, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. The idea that it was somebody from outside, it was an American, it was a member of the upper class, it was the however, it's just absurd. Somebody like that would absolutely have stood out without any doubt whatsoever. So, Colin writes to me, theory that the killer was a sailor from Dundee who had a broad Scottish accent and a speech impediment. No, no chance. He would have stood out. He would have, somebody like that would have been noted. Now, the investigator was from Thurso, if I remember rightly, so he would have had a Scottish accent, Mr. Swanson, one of the investigators. But these American links and all the rest of it. No, there's absolutely, hello Annie. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it was somebody from one of the streets there. Another thing is this: if we take the fourth killing, the one in Mitre Square, then he got back to Goldson Street very quickly. Now I timed myself to see how quickly I could do it, of course, it's slightly different circumstances. But it was claimed that between the Elizabeth third and fourth murders on the night of 30th September 1888, from Elizabeth Stride to in the Jack the Ripper 1988 film, so what he couldn't have done, he was on a coach. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can do it easily within the time from walking from one place to the other. But then in those circumstances, I believe there were these cuts and between properly going through lodging houses and things like that, which the killer would have known because the killer had been in the area for such a long time. Now, these little cuts and passages, which, for example, I can remember as a child where I grew up, there were these sorts of things. They've probably now been all cut off. They're no longer available, and certainly in a place like that, which grew up without building regulations and things like of that nature that there are today, and also there have been holes in walls and this type of thing. These are the sort of things that somebody locally that people would have known about. Anyway, so Christopher writes, it was somebody who suffered with the ravages of natal syphilis. Well, it may well have been. It could have been. One thing that needs to be pointed out, again, this goes against this Aaron Kosminski theory completely. It's that these women were desperate for the money. Of that, I have no doubt. But at the same time, you've got somebody like Aaron Kosminski, who was noted for character, for he would eat off the gutter, wouldn't eat normal food. It's because of his behavior. I think even this desperation for the price of a coffin bed, it's not. I find it very difficult to believe that this would actually. That they would actually even go with him into a dark place. It just seems so. I mean, obviously, it's easy enough for me to say that because I'm not sort of desperate for somewhere to sleep, and I've got enough clothes to keep myself warm. But anyway, that's I think that's a point. Right. Hello, Neela. Gary says, was working on a flat that used to be a Jewish soup kitchen last year. What do you think the chances the Ripper had been there? Well, look, the chance of the Ripper being Jewish is relatively high, given the makeup as the area at the time. Having been a soup kitchen, yeah, I think probably this was somebody who was. It had to be the Ripper had to be someone who had this hatred for some reason. But I would suggest that why did the killings actually stop? Well, first of all, there were five killings. Well, possibly five. There may have been more. There may have been less. I mean, one of the surgeons said involved at the inquest said there were three. They were so, if you again looking at the original source, the police have thought there may have been as many as 11. Now, the reason why they stop is either they get caught or they die. They're the two main reasons. Indeed, one of the suspects that came out later was somebody. The reason he was a suspect was because he was alleged to have committed suicide shortly after 9th of November 1888, when the last murder occurred. As it turned out, despite the fact he's still mentioned as a suspect, his name's Montague Druitt. That was incorrect. He'd actually committed suicide later, but he could have been arrested for another crime, or, and this is one thing, he could have moved. Yes, he could have moved. Or, but if he'd moved, he probably would have continued. This is my understanding. Or alternatively, it had something to do with the last killing. And if you take there is this theory which I actually put out in a video, and that it was related to the last killing. I'll do that in a different video, because if I'll go off on a complete tangent if I do that. So yeah, what maybe some have been copycat. Yes, that was believed at the time that there were copycat killings. So that there's also the idea, bear in mind that whereas the people from outside, and this was definitely done by a local, out of that I don't have any, I have no doubt at all. In fact, there's been, there's been profiling, putting it down to he lived in Flower and Dean Street, for example, might have lived in, or one of the areas around it. I think it's this. It just cannot have been from outside. I just cannot believe that it, to me, it is totally absurd. If I can actually come back to this thing here about this thing being solved, and maybe I ought to really discuss this in detail by going through people's questions, but I just can't believe how this alleged DNA evidence. There's an article in the Journal of Forensic Sciences, and you can find it online. You can find the abstract online. You can't find the journal because it's behind a paywall, and I didn't want to pay for it. But the Journal of Forensic Sciences actually published a letter of what's it called? When you're very when you're highly doubtful. It published a thing, a letter of communication, a letter of concern. That's it, a letter of concern. And this communication is going backwards and forwards. The thing is this: if the DNA, I would say this. Okay, so we've got Aaron Kosminski, the suspect's DNA is on it. How many other people? I mean, also understand there's 90% of the populations. I mean, my DNA is on it. I mean, where did that come from? So this is the thing. It's highly suspect that to start off with DNA evidence, right? But I don't know anything about that. For me, the worst thing is the provenance of this shawl. If it is a shawl, because somebody said it was a tablecloth, but whatever, I don't know. It's not written in the in her possessions. A note was made of her possessions. That was published in the Times and in the Telegraph. How do they explain that? Well, there is an explanation. It said the policeman got there first on the scene, took it for his wife. Now, the problem is this: the policeman who took it, he was first on the scene, is also not written in any of the records. So that means he would have had to got there, took the thing, and made off with it. I mean, it's just the argument is totally absurd. And then they explain this is it's part of the family heritage that it actually belonged to on the Jack the Ripper. I mean, as a historian, I just can't believe how people can be so naive as to believe something like this. It may well have her DNA, but the family had it in their hands, her descendants. And now he's saying, well, the family wants closure. But this, I think, this is just part of the. I mean, he opened it up again. So anyway, Right. It was a bit of a pipe dream to think the DNA would give us a dream result like Hannity, says Gary. Hanratty. Sorry, I can't read that one. Anyway, I have to come back. I don't know Hanratty. Hanratty? That name rings a bell. But anyway, I can't. Mike says it's complete rubbish. Yeah, it is. But the thing for me, I'm not blaming the author because plenty of authors have said things, and there's nothing wrong with having theory as such. And he's not the first person to say he solved the mystery. But what I blame is the news outlets for actually doing that. To me, it's I just can't understand why they did it. Right. So, oh, Hanratty was hanged and proved guilty 50 years later. James Hanratty, the supposed killer. Oh, right. Sorry. The name rings a bell, but I can't remember. Sorry. Right, good. So I think I've sort of put the into perspective a bit. I have done videos on this theme in the past, and okay, I'll just tell you my theory now. And well, it's not my theory. I mean, when I thought of it, it was um, maybe it wasn't very original. And actually, I did discuss it with a friend. Now, a friend, his name's Philip. He's written a book on it. I think it's called The London of Jack the Ripper Then and Now. And he's got a channel called The Guildford Ghost. And so, I mean, I haven't seen him in a very long time, 18 years, something like that. Anyway, and thanks. Thank you very much, Colin. Thank you. Thank you. The I would suggest this is that the last victim is the key. The last victim was killed in the house. So we take the canonical five victims of Jack the Ripper. So the first one's killed on the 31st of April. Then you've got 8th of September. Then you've got 30th of September. Then you've got 9th of November. And one thing about these dates was actually coincided with boats coming in and out of the port. But the police were aware of that and they got onto that one quite quickly. And but anyway, if we take the last killing, which was the most brutal and all the rest of it, and then after that, there's no more. Perhaps it had something to do with that. And the boyfriend of the last victim, who had the key, possibly had the key to the property. He wanted to be with her, but according to what he said at the inquest, they were no longer together because she continued to be a prostitute, and they split. Now, I think it could have something to do with he was in love with her, but she wasn't with him. She continued to be a prostitute. She fell into bad, and he might have done it to frighten her. She was illiterate. I think that was proven somewhere because he said he used to read her the newspaper report. So he certainly might have heard the death of Marta Tabran, who was sometimes thought to be the first victim. She was stabbed 39 times just out the back of where the London hospital is, or was, I should say, because it's now closed. And and it was that he thought if he killed these people, the articles would be in the press. She'd get frightened, others would get frightened, and she would cease to do it. So he did it to. So that to me that made some sense. There's somebody else actually said it that he's a suspect only because he was there at the time, and. And there's nothing else linking. And indeed, he sort of does fit a couple of descriptions. His name was Joseph Barnett. He died in 1927. His own family, according to one author, said that they believed that he was responsible. But then again, also the family of Aaron Kosminski also said that they believed that he was responsible as well. So I think of all the named suspects, he is the most likely, in my opinion. whether or not you could actually do it. Now, Gary asked me about the reports of the medical knowledge. I don't believe that at all. I'm not qualified to judge, so I can only judge by what the doctors actually said at the time. But bearing in mind that this was not all the killings were not done in that way. So I think it's just a case of mutilation, hacking away, and what in pulling parts of the body parts out. And I think that this is more likely to have been done as a form of humiliating the victims. So that's how I see it. And but then again, this is actually, I think this is more a case for what the profilers think. Now, there was the case I've just mentioned about Joseph Barnett. There was an FBI profile, I think, in 1988, if I remember rightly, which came to the same. Well, they came to the conclusion first because I came up with this a bit later. But sorry, it wasn't just me. I mean, other people have said this as well. In fact, there was a video I did, and somebody accused me of copying somebody's theory, and I said, well, considering this video was up before his book came out, I think he's probably copied me. But it wasn't. I mean, it's not original. It's a statement of the obvious, if anything is. But that to me is the most logical person to have done it. So it has to be a person with local knowledge, that we know for certain. He's going to have an accent. He's going to speak like everybody else around there, or like a majority. He's not going to look different because bear in mind that these women went with the person. So it had to be a person they felt relatively safe with in the circumstances. Although I do appreciate their desperation to get the money. So you've got to bear in all of these things. So I would say, okay, the person's going to be relatively shabbily dressed, but he's going to be somebody in work who can afford it, but at the same time he's not earning a great deal of cash. So that along something along those lines, to me, would be the best way of deciding who he was and who he wasn't, more to the point. So anyway, thanks very much there for watching today. And I might go back to doing things like now. Colin just asked me, although I did say at the beginning, I am interested. Okay, my specialization is in Third Reich, and but when you've got history on your doorstep, I lived in London for around 10 years, and so this did take my interest, and so that's it really. But I would say this, another thing actually about the theory I've just said to you, it's also worth bearing in mind. I worked in the press. I owned a magazine, and so as a sort of a press person taking an interest in information, then so that could be said. Well, yeah. This is sort of, I would say anyway, because I'm sort of a press person, so that would explain that. So Colton asked, did Conan Doyle have a theory? I think he did, actually. I seem to remember reading it, but I can't remember what it was. Somebody else. Annie says your videos are always interesting, thank you. And Gary saw a Viz post I wrote yesterday. Yes, Gary, I've forgotten all about that post. About I can't understand why babies are given dummies, although it does stop them biting people, I suppose. A friend of mine had his leg bitten off, but I think a crocodile did that. But anyway, I can't remember writing that, but when I read it myself, I thought that looks like the sort of thing I would have written, then I saw my name at the bottom of it. Okay. Thanks for watching. I'll try and do another. It depends on the time I get back, actually, because I'm now in London, and I try to make the most of it to actually go out and do things. Thank you. And so if I get back before 7 o'clock here, then I can actually do something. But I don't really like doing things when I'm outside and trying to talk into the phone. But anyway, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. And if there's any interest in Jack, I can go into more details in this. But if there are sites that which really do know more than I do, I think. But what if there's anything, I think I can actually set the scene by describing the social conditions at the time, which I attempted to do today. So thank you, all the best, and Bye for now. Oh, and I'll just tell you what I did today. I finished off a video on the very first massacre of the Holocaust. I finished that today, and I'll be offering that before long. For people who've got a the premium, what's it called? I forgot, the membership, channel membership. That's now available. But anyway, thank you, and bye for now. Bye.